You're so obsessed with how I dress that you're going to involve HR? All right, let's get a supervisor involved and see how that goes for you. I work at a hospital that doubles as a research institution. Since I'm on the research side, I have to involve lots of other departments, and most people with whom I work with are very chill and understand that I have to beseech them for things to do my job. I'm one of those, she can go 100 hectares on a single tank of kerosene type of people, and I'm very on top of things, for which my coworkers value me. However, the one place where that camaraderie breaks down is with some of the nurses who work in my specific clinic, focusing on one particular disease. Honestly, I've done a good job making most of the nurses like me. I bring them homemade treats sometimes, and I'm always extra friendly and approbative with them. Some of them have their days regardless, and I put up with them. Right after I first started working in that specific clinic, unfortunately, one nurse in particular, let's call her Bitchelle, had decided that I was on her blacklist. Bitchelle hates doing work. She's like a kid playing Xbox when their parent asks them for help with groceries. She'll moan and groan, and if she helps at all, it's with an angsty indignation. I needed a series of blood tubes drawn in clinic for a patient one morning instead of down in phlebotomy, protocol rules, more complicated and stupid than it's worth getting into here, and Bitchelle was the only nurse available. She was extremely put off at my asking her to draw this protocol kit, despite my giving advance notice to clinic that this needed to be done. She clearly did not want to leave her computer, which was not open to anything work-related, but she begrudgingly went and drew the tubes. She was unnecessarily profusely thanked by me, just for doing her damn job. I came back down later to get a prescription signed for another patient, and a different nurse asked me what I'd done to upset Bitchelle because she'd apparently been going off about me to anyone who would listen. I explained what had happened. The other nurse informed me that Bitchelle was pissed at me, and also felt my outfit, a white medical coat, a modest blouse, work pants, and high-heel boots, was too provocative. What? I just decided to let it go and try to avoid Bitchelle as much as possible. This did not work. I kept running into situations where the other nurses were busy seeing patients. I was forced to walk back into the nurse triage room, which is off-limits to patients, and ask Bitchelle to draw 2 more of these blood kits in the next month. She was never happy to see me, and she was always wasting time on her work computer when I entered the room. Maybe 2 or 3 days after that last kit draw, my supervisor called me in her office to discuss my presentation. She very nicely, and with pity in her voice, told me she'd received a report about my dress habits in patient-facing spaces. She said she personally hadn't noticed anything, no shit, but was obligated to discuss this with me anyhow. I assured her I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought about confronting Bitchelle, but decided not to because, loose cannon and whatnot. After a brief reminder of the dress code, I figured that at least it was over. It was not over. 2 weeks later, and I hadn't even asked anyone to draw any kits in the interim, a formal report was filed against me for my conduct in clinic. This went to the hospital and then my supervisor who, even after reading the report, seemed totally clueless about what it could mean. I explained what had been happening with Bitchelle, but then my supervisor told me a second person had reported this as well, on the same day as who was obviously Bitchelle. This time, it was a patient. The patient had reported that I was dressing improperly for a patient-facing environment. Whoa. I asserted that I wasn't, but I was nonetheless put on probation, which meant that my supervisor, against her will, now had to come with me when I saw patients in clinic for the foreseeable future. And a nurse manager would have to accompany both of us when she was free since I was dressing provocatively in patient-facing spaces and that was her domain. But as you can likely guess from her browsing habits, Bitchelle was not the sort of person who needed more supervisors in her area. Cue malicious compliance. Fine, you want to punish me and force me to work in the eyesight of the supervisors? All right, let's get some supervisors down here as quickly as possible. My next in-clinic patient came in 2 days, and it was one of those stupid timed in-clinic protocol kit visits, which meant I was forced to ask one of the nurses to draw the patient's blood. I informed my supervisor, and we set off down for clinic. The nurse manager was in that day, so she accompanied the 2 of us. We all went back into the triage room so that I could ask for help with the blood draw. Bitchelle and one other nurse were there. What we saw upon entering was the other nurse entering vital signs for a patient into our health database, and Bitchelle, sitting at her desk with an online clothing retailer open on one monitor and Facebook on the other. I asked for Bitchelle's help drawing the kit, and she sighed heavily and spun around to see 2 higher-ups looking on with disdain at her work computer. In embarrassment, she swiveled back and closed those 2 tabs, which revealed, "You can't make this stuff up," a website for marital aids that had been open in another tab, about which Bitchell had clearly forgotten until now. I just smiled and handed her the bag like nothing had happened. In the hall, my supervisor and the nurse manager were talking about Bitchell's display just now. Apparently, she had previously been warned about goofing off at work. The nurse manager told the supervisor that she was going to check all of Bitchell's work computer activity, which I actually didn't know any supervisor could readily access. What followed was so incredibly beautiful that I hope it made the ending of this long post worth waiting for. According to the nurse who'd initially asked me what I had done to upset Bitchell, her activity was searched. She was revealed to have been spending hours upon hours every day browsing the web, shopping, and using social media. Since she had been previously warned about this behavior, she was given a formal write-up. But this was just the beginning. The day after the three of us went down to clinic, my supervisor called me in her office again. She told me that Bitchell had fabricated the patient complaint about me and posted it from her work computer. How did they learn this? Oh, that'd be because she saved a draft of the message that reported me to the hospital, and she'd accessed the patient complaint/comment webpage the same day. My supervisor sincerely apologized for the hassle and told me I was no longer on probation. As for Bitchell, apparently fearing the worst, she put her 2 weeks' notice in the same day after getting wind that she was in some far more serious trouble. For reasons I will never understand as long as I live, the hospital chose to let her quit after 2 weeks instead of firing her on the spot. Maybe they knew what a nightmare she was and were comfortable letting her quit on her own accord. It's not as though she was due to glean any glowing references from this experience. Maybe they just wanted some extra work. Our clinic was very short-staffed for nurses at the time. In any case, they chose not to fire her and let her quit on her own. On Bitchell's last day, I ventured down to the triage room to retrieve some outside records from their printer. When I entered, Bitchell was alone and browsing Glassdoor. I unbuttoned my white coat and told her, "Hey, good luck with your next job. I hope the employees are less provocative." She slowly spun around with a scowl on her face. Then I lifted my dress up to my neck, flashed her my bare tits, and walked out, and I never saw Bitchell again. TLDR setup. I run drug trials at a research hospital. A clinic nurse decided she hated me because I made her do her job and, she claimed, dressed provocatively. She made a formal report against me, and then a patient one surfaced. I was put on probation and made to see all patients with supervisors. TLDR resolution/malicious compliance. I brought supervisors down as quickly as possible. Said supervisors found out the nurse had been spending many hours a day on non-work-related websites, and the patient report against me turned out to have been fabricated by the same nurse. She quit in disgrace, and on her last day, I gave her a nice parting gift. Story 2. Only do what is in my job title? Fine. Good luck paying employees. So, I work for a construction company as an inventory admin. My job is to basically schedule counts of our warehouse and input the numbers they give me for inventory. Then try to see what the problem is when the numbers on the last count and current count don't add up. There is a little bit more to it, but I will not bore you with the specifics. The problem with this job is that when you have been doing it long enough and are good at it, there is less work to do. In the beginning, when counting one rack out of 60 racks of material would take a few days, it was fine because I was always busy. But now that everything is in order, the entire warehouse can be counted in 3 days. This leaves me bored for most of the time. So, to fix this, I studied up on our cloud-based ERP service that we use for all internal and external transactions and have become sort of an expert on it. Every single aspect of this company uses this ERP service to do their job. Timesheets, HR, payroll, accounting, scheduling, management, manufacturing, ordering from vendors, delivering, inventory, etc. all runs through this ERP service. So it is very important that this service is up and running perfectly 24/7. I became so proficient in this service that our VP decided to cut ties with our consultants of the ERP because I could do what they did but better, quicker, and much cheaper. For reference, we were paying these consultants $5,000 a month just to be on standby if we needed them for some sort of problem that could arise from using this ERP, and had to dish out more money to fix those problems depending on how many hours of their time was spent to fix said problems. Not sure on their exact rate, but it was something like $200 an hour, and they took weeks to fix anything, while I could fix the problem in time for my daily afternoon ship break. I never got an official job title or raise of any kind for being an expert on this service. The company just saw me being able to do it and let me fix things that happened so they no longer needed the outside help. I wasn't upset because it gave me something due, so I was glad to help the company save money, even if none of that money fell my way. Skip ahead a few months. We now have a new warehouse manager, and someone in the warehouse fucks something up in inventory by sending a bunch of materials to the wrong job with no records of it being shipped. We are talking $500,000 fuck up here. In the same day, our ERP had an update that caused a bunch of bugs with our accounting department. So, I decided to work on the ERP problem first because the warehouse fuck up is more of a delay fuck up and not actually stopping anybody from doing their job at the moment, while this accounting problem means our bills are not able to be paid. You can guess what kind of issues we will have if bills are not paid. The ERP bugs turn out to be quite big and numerous, so it ends up taking me a couple days to figure out, but I fix it before any bills are actually due and decided to take lunch a little early to celebrate a victory. Crisis averted. New warehouse manager storms into my office after I get back from lunch and is livid. Apparently, the bosses were pinning the blame on him for the warehouse fuck-up. And considering he is the one who oversees shipments and personnel in the warehouse, the blame is rightfully placed. He starts laying into me asking why I have not fixed the problem yet, yelling and screaming like a child. I tried explaining that I was fixing an ERP issue and have not had time to look at the warehouse problem yet. He gets even more angry and notes that it is funny how I have time to take early lunches but not do my job. That started to piss me off, but I held my tongue and kept calm about the situation. He then ordered me to only do what is in my job title and to leave the ERP bullshit to the people competent enough to handle it, as he put it. Since this guy was technically my supervisor, I had no choice but to obey. I asked him to send me that in writing, and he snarks and storms back into his office. 5 minutes later, I get an email stating that under no circumstances am I to work on anything related to ERP unless it involves inventory. QMC. I do nothing but inventory from that point forward, knowing damn well that we would be essentially coasting until we hit a problem that I would refuse to fix. Sure enough, not even a week later I get an email from HR that some sort of bug in the ERP system was preventing them from accessing payroll to pay employees this week. I reply an apology that I am no longer able to work on ERP bugs due to supervisor and to refer to the ERP system help guide for further assistance. I knew the help guide was not going to help her in the slightest, but it was no longer my problem, so I was not going to deal with it. Skip a few days later to Friday. I checked my bank account in the morning before getting to work and laughed because there was no money deposited. That problem never got fixed. I hurry up and get to work, excited to see the chaos unfold. And what I was expecting was an understatement. When I show up to work, I see the entire warehouse staff of 50 people walking out of the front door. I stopped one and asked why they are leaving, and they replied with, "I didn't get paid today, so I am not coming back until I do." I go into the office and see the warehouse manager in a panic. He has jobs that need material and nobody to load it onto trucks or deliver. I ask him if he needs help with anything, and he just screams at me to leave his office because he is getting phone calls out the ass from superintendents of jobs asking why our material has not arrived yet. I pass by HR on the way to my office and see a bunch of the bosses huddled up over her computer with her with angry and confused expressions on their face, I guess trying to figure out the problem. I felt bad for her because it really was something out of her control, but I knew she would ultimately be okay because she had been there for so long that they would never fire her. When I get to my office, I see the VP waiting for me there. He has a very pissed off expression on his face. When we get inside, he demands to know why I did not fix the problem in HR when she emailed me about it. I replied that I am no longer allowed to work on ERP problems as it is not in my job title. He has the most shocked look on his face and asked why all of a sudden I had a change of heart. I show him the email from warehouse manager, and I could see the dots connect in his head. He immediately storms out, and I see him heading straight to the warehouse manager's office. They were in there for a few hours, but eventually he comes back to my office. He seems calmer now and asks me politely if I can fix the problem in HR and if I can resume fixing the ERP if needed. At this point, I liked the relief of responsibility and told him I would only do it if he put it officially in my job title along with a raise. His calmness turned to anger again, and he says, "I cannot believe you," as he storms out and returns to his office. A few hours later, he sends out a mass email that he has hired the old ERP consultants to fix the problem and that next week, everyone would be paid for the money they are owed, along with the money they earned if they returned to work. This one surprised me as he would rather pay over $60,000 a year to consultants than give me a few extra bucks an hour for better work. I think he expected me to change my mind and just do it for my own paycheck, but I decided to wait because I knew how these consultants were, and if they managed to fix this problem in a week, I would streak naked through the office. Most of the warehouse staff agreed to return, but were still upset about not getting paid. Sure enough, next Friday comes around. Nobody gets paid again. At this point, it is becoming a real problem, and the entire staff is becoming agitated. They have bills to pay. I even heard a bunch of the warehouse talking about some competitors nearby they could go work for. At this point, I even considered just fixing the problem because the warehouse didn't deserve to be treated like that due to poor management. Maybe I am the asshole here for this, but I am severely underpaid and can barely afford my apartment. There is no reason I should do extra work for free. That same day, the VP returns to my office and hands me papers. These papers said that I would be promoted to a newly created position that dealt with inventory/ERP upkeep. It would be its own department, and he would be my direct supervisor. Also came with a hefty raise. All I had to do was sign and agree. I looked up at him after reading the paper, and he had the saddest look on his face. Please just sign it. The consultants said it would take them weeks to get around to fixing it due to the high volume of clients they have taken on, and we cannot keep skipping paychecks. I happily signed it and immediately got to work on the HR issue. Managed to even fix it that same day. It was just a simple problem with the permissions of HR and payroll in the ERP due to the update. Tildar, I was doing work outside my job title. Supervisor gets mad and tells me no. I stop and company is unable to pay employees for 2 weeks. Vice President finally caves in and gives me promotion to do said work outside my job title along with a raise. Story 3. You know your rights? Okay, go for it. Background. My ex and I were 3 months into separation, as I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find what she would accept other than take her back and return to bring a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents, and understood very early that as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally it was very likely I was going to be paying alimony, and she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preferences, it did mean a fair share. It was clear that legally I would not get an approval for an agreement heavily biased in her favor. So I kept reworking and sending possible divisions. Every few days for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Any time I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation to something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so everything went to email only. Through all of this, I had recognized too that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. Not a total doormat at this point, though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up her weekly cash flow and kept paying the bills. But my final offer in this period was the heavily unbalanced offer of splitting the cars 1 to each, me taking all the debt including her student loans, paying her $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so she could get her feet under her. And she gets all the stuff. I walk away with my car, my dogs, some tools, and some clothes. No go. Not good enough for her. And so we get to the meat of the story for the MC. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator, since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we have seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks, but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agree to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions. And every question, to either of us, results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolve to gray rock her directly and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk, 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh boy. Not true at all. not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdraw by her card. Over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 and change. You missed a couple zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It is 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up screwed more here. Not to mention I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. Court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up and plops herself next to me to start going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you were writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement. She huffs a few seats away and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it is a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money I made, because he is just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by. And she asks me if I have anything I'd like to say. She can see the stack of paper and eyeballs it as she is talking. I hand over the stack, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single one. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yin, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of it and gestures to encompass the stack of paper needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I knew it was going to be. She didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed, and I wanted to be sure the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I didn't want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too, for much the same reason. Also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the totals, signed papers, I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side-eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying, "It might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you are free to go." I got the hint and left immediately. I had parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I am obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay. And work down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then texts from her sister's phone. Then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. OMG. Even Netflix. I admit I giggled. The fallout wasn't over, though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It is denied due to lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payment. Just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loans account. She legally could. Just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point, and we both go to court. She is going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally asks my ex for proof that I wasn't paying the car payment, as she is holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation." The complaint is dismissed. "Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. Divorce took another 10 months, lots more crazy, teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support and only about 60% of the debt. I lost my dogs to her, though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now, the other is in that range. I still miss them,